Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us here for another episode, wherever in the world you're listening to us from, whatever platform you're listening to us on. As always, thank you so much for your support. Thank you for sharing this podcast with others who you know would like it. And as always, thank you for the very kind messages that you've left or sent me directly, Twitter, email. It's awesome. Today's topic is one that we all as coaches have to game plan for and all have to have some sort of strategy in place for. And we're going to talk today about developing players of all skill levels and what we can do as coaches to help, our 12th man versus our very best player. And obviously our journey to try and get our players to where we want them to be, it's going to look a little bit different for everyone. You listening right now may have players that are on a certain track and ready to do things with basketball after high school. Some of you listening may have players who are all going to be finished up with their career after high school. And so many of you also are probably in situations in between where you have players who have aspirations after high school and some who are just playing to play. And this is going to be it for them after they're done, maybe with their high school career. So we're going to get into developing players of all skill levels, trying to figure out some ideas about things that are most fair, the most equitable, and a lot of things in between. And I'm really happy to have a guest on here who's passionate about this topic and is willing to share what he's done with his program to develop players of all skill levels. I'm very happy to be joined by the head varsity basketball coach of Middleton High School, Coach Nate Hartman. Coach, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
No, I'm doing great. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on the podcast, to share the game a little bit, talk hoops, talk development. Definitely don't have all the answers from a kind of a skill development, player development perspective, but have learned from some really cool people and, have a staff that's passionate about it. And we kind of pride ourselves at Middleton High School, and really focus on being a player development program. So really appreciate having me on. Big fan of the show.
Yeah, really appreciate the opportunity to kind of see some things that you've learned along the way and things that you and your program have done as well. Should be good. Coach, let's go ahead and get started with your basketball journey, your coaching journey. Where's the game taking you? Where's your coaching journey taking you that led you to Middleton?
Yeah, so I'm from Idaho. I played high school basketball in Idaho, had the chance to play collegiately, ended up with an injury and kind of, didn't pursue that. But even in high school, and coaches are listening to this, we get it. Like I always tell my kids, like we're crazy as coaches. We're a bunch of psychos. We look at things differently and we, obsess over things that people wouldn't even think about. And even as a player early on, I kind of knew that I had coaching in me and just kind of felt like I saw the game a little bit differently and was passionate about some of that. And felt like coaching was a little bit of a calling even early on, kind of a God-given gift to give back to kids and really try to make a difference in other people's lives through the game of basketball. I'm big into, teaching kids, leadership lessons and doing it through the game of basketball and life lessons and lessons when they go to get their first job and, when they go and they get married and they have their own kids and all these different things that, basketball can teach them and things that they learn in this setting, even at the high school setting. They have 10, 12, however many other teammates that, they're learning to get along with and work with and sacrifice for and deal with frustrations. And, maybe they're not getting, something that they think they deserve or the time or whatever it is. There's so many lessons that the game can teach you. And I'm passionate about that. So my coaching career started at Idaho Falls High School. I got started underneath somebody that I would call an Idaho legend in Howard Hart. And I started at the freshman level my very first year. We went 17-3 that year at the biggest classification in Idaho. Had just kids that I just loved. And I was just learning. I was 23 at the time. And we were just figuring it out together. We were teaching, I was teaching them the game. We're trying to build a team and just having the time of our lives doing it. So I got started there as a freshman coach, and then I had 2 years off of coaching. I was finishing up a master's degree, and we made a move over to Boise for my wife's job. And then when my freshman group was seniors at Idaho Falls High School, I had the opportunity to take a job. I don't teach. I'm not in the school system, right now. And so I found a job that allowed me to move back to Idaho Falls, and that would allow me to coach.
Yeah.
And so, and again, I owe it all really to Coach Hart. I called him and told him I had the chance to come back, and those kids were seniors, and they kind of had a disappointing junior year. They finished with a losing record, didn't make it to state. But we always talked about when they were younger, you guys can be a state championship team. That's the goal. And I told Coach Hart, I'll just come be a volunteer. I'll film, I'll do anything just to be around it. But
Yeah.
he actually had an opening that year for for somebody at the varsity level to be his assistant. So I was able to jump right back in. He gave me a lot of autonomy right away to coach. We actually started the season that year 5-4, and then we won 15 of our next 16 games. I think it was 11 in a row. Won the state championship at Idaho Falls High School, broke a 31-year drought. So that was my first year back at Idaho Falls, my second year coaching. Then I spent the next season on staff again with Coach Hart. We won 20 games, back-to-back 21 season, went back to the state tournament. And then I was an interim head coach last year at Idaho Falls High School. Coach Hart was battling through some health issues, and he's doing a lot better now, which I'm grateful for. And that's a huge blessing for him and his family, and also for me as someone who cares about him. But I had the chance to be at the head coach at the interim level, and it came about 2 or 3 weeks before the season. It was, hey, you're the interim head coach, and it was through COVID too, right? It was when COVID
Oh, wow, yeah.
just going on, so we had no fans in the gym. We weren't even sure if we were gonna have a season, really. We didn't know. The kids were kind of half in school, half online, so just everything you can imagine in your first real I guess you call it a real job as the interim. I mean, technically the wins and losses still went to Coach Hart, but just crazy stuff. And so I spent that year, had great kids though, and we battled and did some things. And then from there, that led me back to the Treasure Valley. I got the head coaching job at Middleton High School. We're about 30-40 minutes outside of Boise, in a growing area. So Middleton's been a great fit for me. Really good fit. It's a basketball community. It's been a ton of fun to be a part of, and just kind of, take in that passion from the fans, from the community.
Yeah.
Came in with a fully brand new staff. I didn't bring anybody with me. I didn't, it was like I had a bunch of resumes and started making calls and started trying to figure things out. And
oh, wow.
I'm super lucky and really blessed to have a really good staff, and a staff that gets along and loves the game. And here we are, we got a month left in our regular season now, and we're sitting at 15-1, and we got 13 wins in a row, which, as far as I could go back, which was 12 years, it's the longest win streak that Middleton has had, at least in the last 12 years. And just a really special group. I mean, we haven't won anything yet, we know that, but winning is hard, and we're enjoying that process as we continue to get better. We continue to preach good to great. And so those are things that we're focusing on. How do we go from good to great, and how do we refine that, and how do we continue to get better?
I want to ask, before I get to my first question, about you picking a staff. And I think that that's a unique experience, and something that maybe some people would be interested in your insight of that. What was that like? What was that process like? What were you looking for? How did that kind of come together, of you trying to make that decision of who was the best person to be part of the Middleton staff?
Yeah, it was really, really unique. I told my wife early, that was one of the things that I was most concerned about, was just finding the right staff and the right people who fit in. And so I try to be very careful. I try to vet that process very carefully. I spent quite a bit of time having conversations with people who that I trusted, that have maybe hired before, and things that they look for in their staff. I mean, I had my things that I wanted. Obviously player development's a big focus. I was looking in areas there, and You know, I was looking for people who, you know, have a presence or and also involved in the community. And there's just a couple different boxes that I was trying to check at each level. I mean, I needed my assistant, I needed a JV head coach and a JV assistant, which I actually didn't end up getting this year, but we've, you know, I think we've made a hire and have somebody coming in ready to help at the JV level next year. And then I needed a sophomore slash freshman head coach and assistant coach. So, you know, I spent a lot of time, and then I had a stack of resumes. I just started making phone calls and asking questions and, you know, kind of just talking to people, trying to create relationships, seeing what they cared about, how we meshed, you know, how would they support the kids? What could they bring to the table that maybe that I don't have? Like, for example, my assistant he's a certified athletic trainer, which is something just different.
Wow. Yeah.
I can't tape a kid's ankle. I have a business degree and a leadership master. I
Yeah.
couldn't do that. And he has great basketball qualifications as well. He had a player development business and has done some things, but that was something to me that was just different as well. Like, man, we could, you know, be a little bit better and be a little bit different in some areas. And, you know, he ended up being a good fit. I mean, two of the guys are from out of state that came too. So it wasn't even just
Wow.
Middleton guys or Idaho guys. I mean, I hired two guys from out of state, and then I hired, you know, a guy that is in the community and is just phenomenal with the sophomore group. He's great. He's exactly what we needed. And he's somebody that I rely on and trust a lot. And then his son, who was playing college basketball, is actually on staff coaching with his dad, which is a pretty cool, really unique situation. And Caden was somebody that I could look at and kind of reminded me of myself when I got my coaching journey started. I started at the freshman level. I was 23. You know, Caden's around that age. He started at the freshman level. He's played basketball at a high level. He played D2 at Northwest Nazarene. So, you know, it just kind of all came together. The JV assistant, or the JV head coach, sorry, he had years of experience in California and just came off. You know, they won a championship down there in California, and he's coached at different schools for different guys. So it just all fit together, and they kind of blended into what I believed in and my philosophy. But it took a lot of conversations and
I'm sure
questions and a lot of deciphering, and you know, but it's been huge. I really believe that we have one of the best staffs in the state, just from a, you know, an all around perspective, and it's been awesome. It showed. Like, I owe a lot of this success this season, one, to the players, like they're the ones out there playing and winning games, and then two, to my staff.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting how much can go into it and all the different aspects that you think about, and I 100% agree with you about, you know, I would think if I was trying to do what you were doing about having people who had like skill sets that maybe weren't mine necessarily, people can kind of fill in those gaps that I have. And yeah, just so much to sift through. But I could imagine it was a lot that you got to learn about yourself as a person, and a lot you got to learn about yourself as a coach by going through that process and kind of thinking of the things you valued as well.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting.
You got to kind of list all that stuff out and define it, and really come to, you know, like trim off the fat. Like, what is it I believe in, and who do I need to help us drive that forward? And then also being able to say, like, man, I'm not great in this area, or I would love to improve in this area. This guy has some of those skills, so, you know, let's bring him in and be an addition. And ultimately just to help the kids get, you know, reach their goals. I mean, that's what we're here to do. We're here to coach them and build them into leaders and help them reach their goals.
Yeah, awesome. Coach, before we dive into the topic, I did want to talk about your background and your experience regarding organizational leadership. And I was curious about what that specifically entails. If I remember correctly, you have a master's degree in organizational leadership, and what that entails, and what has that done that's kind of helped you as a basketball coach?
Yeah, no, I love that question. I was, so I had a business undergrad, and I initially went and enrolled in an MBA program and got started. And I was actually one of two people for a job at Nike headquarters, and kind of jumped the gun and thought I was going to get the job there, and kind of dropped out of my program and started getting ready to make the move. I'd been married for about a month, and getting ready to make the move and found out I didn't have that job. And so then I was out of my master's program and out of my job. And that ultimately led me to my first coaching stop. So a little bit of a blessing in disguise, but
Right.
I was just passionate about leadership. You know, I remember hearing about it when I was young, and you know, hearing statements about natural leaders and natural born leaders, and this guy's a leader and he's a great leader, and look at this, and just kind of heard the term and was, you know, pretty familiar with the term. And then in my undergrad and college, I really started to kind of get serious about leadership and began buying books and
Mm-hmm.
listening to podcasts and talking to my teachers, and tried to seek out advice from people in leadership roles really as often as I could. And, you know, I think even when you look at, you know, certain, even coaches, or you look like business to business, maybe competitors who have the same product, there's a lot of really good products and companies or teams out there, or talented players. But in my mind, it's that it's mindset and leadership that separates these good to great companies or these good to great teams. And it just like sparked an interest in me that I was like, I gotta go on this leadership journey and try to find out what it is. I mean, there's people, you know, way smarter than I am out there that I'm trying to seek and learn from. And you know, and part of that journey was, you know, Coach George Raveling. He's in the Hall of Fame. He's, you know, he coached in the Pac, I think it was the Pac-8 at the time, maybe the Pac-10, at USC and Washington State. And he coached at Iowa. He played at Villanova.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's on stage with Dr. King as he gave his "I Have a Dream" speech, and Coach Rav actually has that original copy of the speech. Just a really cool story. If anybody hasn't heard that, I would kind of encourage you to go type that into Google and Coach Rav, Dr. King speech, and just, you know, he's playing security guard at the mall. He's a big basketball player. He gets asked to, or I mean, he's just walking around the mall with his friend, gets asked to come be security on stage for Dr. King, and then asks for the speech when he's done and gets it, holds on to it, and still has it to this day. And I found an old
Wow.
book of his in my grandparents' basement. We were having dinner and kind of down there just looking through some things, and my brother pulled out this book and, you know, showed it to me. And it's this, I think it was called Cougar Camp or something, from his
Yeah.
Washington State days back in, you know, the late 70s, early 80s, somewhere around there. And just, it was in phenomenal shape. I couldn't believe it. And I had followed Coach Rav on Twitter and online. Just, again, he's a great leader and someone I was trying to learn from afar. And I got this book and I sent him a picture of it on Twitter, just not thinking anything of it, but he messaged me back and asked if he could get it from me. And I said, absolutely. But under one condition, like, please take one phone call with me at least, just so I can pick your brain and ask you some questions. And he said yes, and he sent me his phone number. And I was nervous, so nervous to give him a call. And you know, we just talked about leadership and basketball and working in athletics, and that friendship, and, you know, kind of sprung into a mentorship. And I was able to go to Los Angeles and meet with him in 2016 in his office. And he challenged me that day. So I was, you know, now I'm a couple years kind of into leadership and getting passionate about it. He challenged me that day to take the topic of leadership and to study it for a year straight. Just read books, podcasts, talk to different people, just try to become an expert. Take a year and try to become an expert in leadership. And at the time, I had actually just enrolled into my master's degree, organizational leadership, and that just kind of all continued to feed the fire there. And I've strived to maintain that consistent study of leadership even today in 2022. And you know, I feel like beyond X's and O's, the best coaches, CEOs, teachers, you name it, they're the best leaders. So organizational leadership, essentially, I mean, I took an HR emphasis, so it was all about kind of employee engagement and employee morale, and how to lead in an organization and how to do it through. So I feel like on the business side, it was more through some numbers, right? We're doing qualitative research, we're doing consumer behavior, we're talking about, I'm a digital marketer now. Today we're talking about digital marketing and digital advertising on Google and all these different ways to get in front of people. But the organizational leadership master side of it for me was, how do I maximize the effectiveness of my people? How do I lead the people in front of me, not through numbers, right? Through engagement, through, one-on-one conversations, through finding out what motivates somebody. Because I had 10 guys on my team this year at the varsity level. Sometimes you go 12, but
Yeah.
all 10 of those guys, I mean, there's something different that motivates every single one of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And my job as a coach, in my opinion, from basketball and leadership, is I got to find out what motivates each guy, and then how do I respect that and help them reach that, but also turn that into a team. Like, we got to be 10 together towards a common
Right.
team
Put them
goal.
together. Yeah.
We can't have 10 separate goals and expect to win, but I value, respect, and want you to share your individual goals. How can we now put that into the team goals, and how do we, so we talk about that stuff often. I just Friday or Saturday morning at practice, we talked about, when practice was over, I made them each go around and say, it's February, it's basketball is a long season, we've got a month left. I mean, we're kind of through the grind, and what is it that's motivating you right now? What's keeping you guys going? And I'll have one-off conversations with guys, so I think that's critical, but I also think it's important to have those conversations in front of each other. So
Sure.
Tyler sees what motivates Owen, and Owen sees what motivates Mike, and Mike sees what motivates Marshall, and Marshall sees what motivates Talmadge, whatever that is. But now you get a little bit vulnerable as well, and you got to share, and you got to talk, and you got to, like,
That's tough for kids sometimes.
It's tough for me,
for adults.
And I always I make my assistants, we get in on that too, and we, keep it a safe place where it's, we're not here laughing at each other or making fun of somebody. Like,
right.
It's okay to get a little vulnerable, and it's extremely powerful to get 16 to 18-year-olds a little bit vulnerable and kind of talking about things that they care about, and
right.
it goes a long way. And I think just kind of building the overall camaraderie, cohesion, and now you're playing for, like, okay, I know what motivates my teammate. I'm going to go fight for that. I'm going to be a great teammate and fight for that, and help him get that as well.
Yeah, and that answer that you gave, it's such a great transition, and really, I think, also lays the foundation kind of into the topic, and why you and your staff are so passionate about the idea of player development of all players at all skill levels. And yeah. I think your answer sort of kind of gave the answer to my next question, but I'll ask it explicitly about you and your staff, and the philosophy that you guys have towards skill development, and how do you guys kind of work and kind of map out your plan where players are getting a plan that kind of works for them depending on where it is that they're at?
Yeah, no, this is a phenomenal question, and I mean, it is like, how do you map out a plan? Many individuals and programs kind of tout skill development, but ultimately, I believe, if you want to go from good to great, like we preach, you have to have a mapped out plan that's unique to each individual player. It's got to be, I mean, it's hard to throw a one size fits all the guys. Sometimes when we get in the season, we are doing a little more one size. We're still, working with guys on individual things, but
sure.
If I'm talking about my overall philosophy, I always talk to our players in our program, and I take a lot of pride in being a player development program, like I've said, about not getting bored with the basics. Or at least what they think might be basic. So, like, let's take the late great Kobe Bryant, for example. You hear, stories about him and about the endless amounts of reps that he put into his footwork. Just footwork stories. And he's in the gym 2 hours before people, and he's doing what some NBA guys think is, basic footwork, but he absolutely dominated people with his feet, and he got anywhere he wanted on the floor because of his feet. And I tell our guys all the time, great footwork will get you out of trouble. So we focus on a couple of things as a whole. There's kind of, 4 or 5 areas that we're really focusing on when it comes to skill development. One is ball handling, especially, weak hand development. I mean, at the high school level, typically speaking, players could not they're just not very good with their weak hand. And
Sure.
for them to be able to drive and go finish with their weak hand, it just doesn't happen often. So we try to focus on, some of that weak hand development. It's a conversation my staff and I have all the time. Players have to be able to use both hands, be a two-way driver and a two-way playmaker. When we're going through and scouting somebody, that's one of the first things we look for is, can he play both directions? Nope, he can't go to his left hand. All right, we'll sit on his right hand, force him to go left, sit on the spin move back to his right hand, and just funnel him one way. And it can be extremely difficult for that. Number two, we work footwork, and we drill footwork every single day as a program together. And then we spend another, 10 to 15 minutes on footwork. And ultimately the beauty of drilling footwork is you can tie it into other skill development areas.
Yeah, so kind of working on footwork all the time, right?
Yeah, you're doing it all the time. So, and I learned a ton from Coach Phil Beckner, an Arizona guy. I'm sure you're familiar with him. I've been down there to his clinics, and he was actually at Boise State for a season, and I had the chance to go to Boise State's practice and watch him work with Chandler Hutchinson before he got drafted in the first round, and started picking his brain and really following basically everything that he's done, kind of making him a mentor from afar.
Sure.
Maybe without him even really knowing it, but now I am part of, he's got a kind of this exclusive mentorship group that I'm a part of, and we're talking these things on a monthly basis. And it's been huge for me to take back to our kids in, Middleton, Idaho, and to take it back to my staff. But as we're working feet, so there's one thing we took from him, it's Hall of Fame footwork. So we're doing this segment of Hall of Fame footwork every single day. We're working rips, pivots, jabs with our feet, but also, we can jump into a finishing drill and still be working footwork. Or when we jump into our shooting drill, we're still working our feet. We're fighting for our feet. We're doing the work low with our feet. And of course, when you're handling the ball, you're working on footwork. So we drill playing off 2 feet in our program. We're big into playing off 2 feet, ribs, pivots, jabs, stride stops. And we started hitting footwork the minute I got hired back in the summer. Have done it every day since. And honestly, we've substantially cut down on the amount of travel calls. And our younger levels have really benefited as the season's gone on from just drilling footwork, not getting bored with the basics. Like the other thing Phil says, and I'll take a lot of this from him. Like I said, he's a whole lot smarter than I am, but like you got to be great at the things that happen a lot, and one of them is our feet, right? That's happening all the time. We're using our feet in the game of basketball. So those are things that we're just hitting daily as footwork. The other one that we focus on, number 3, would be change pace, change direction. So we're looking to get guys playing at different speeds with and without the ball. So again, a quote that I absolutely love from Coach Beckner is, the best players are the best movers, but the elite are the best movers with the ball. So you think
I like that. Yeah. Go ahead.
I just sent out an edit the other day to we have our chat in our team app, and I just sent him an edit the other day of Devin Booker, and he gets a rebound and he's going hard up the floor, and he just stops at the 3-point line. And of course the defender fell down, went flying. And so, but I told the kids, I'm like, that's not what I'm looking at. That's not what I want you to get excited about. That's a result of Devin Booker being able to sprint with the basketball and stop with the basketball in like his next step, right? He's dribble, pound, his height of handles high. It's right, so he can pick it up into his shooting pocket. He takes that last pound and he stops, and his feet stop. And like, he's not falling over his feet. So you think, like, if you go running full speed, dribbling a basketball and stop, most people
go flying.
They fall over.
Yeah.
You're leaning forward. Then you start getting, well, 1, it's going to be a travel. 2, okay, maybe the defender fell back, but you fell into the defender's lap, or you couldn't stop. but it like the elite he's pound, 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 boom, one step, stops, the defender is gone. His height of handle puts the ball right back into his shooting pocket, and it's up and shot before the defender has even stopped falling backwards.
Yeah.
And so but it's the same, it's in its base and balance. It's like, can you keep that base and that balance as you're pounding that ball up the floor? Like, you can't be falling backwards either,
Right.
or you can't be falling sideways. So it's that change pace, change direction. And we worked. So when I got here, I was told like, well, you don't have any guards, you don't have a point guard, that's going to be your biggest problem. And we had a kid that we saw early in the summer that we were like, that's our point guard. Like, there's no question in our minds. Like, we're going to get to work with him, and there's some things we need to do, but he's our point guard. And he's been phenomenal this season with his change pace, change direction. And I've had some JV coaches come up to me and say, man, we knew he played last year, but did he play? I'm like, I don't know. I wasn't here.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but just people that are like shocked at some of his development. And I'm not taking credit for all of his development. Like, we did not develop, like it's not all us. I'm not saying that, but like his ability to change pace, change direction, oh man, it is phenomenal. And it's gotten better. I mean, we threw him into the fire. We went to a team camp at Utah Valley University, played 2 of the top teams in Utah, like week 1. We have none of our offense in, nothing. I just got here a week ago. We tell this kid, like, all right, go play point guard against a couple really good point guards. And
threw him in the fire. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's made strides just based off his ability to change pace, change direction. Like, and I always tell our guys, like, the ball has to move with your body, not your body with the ball. So if the ball gets out, and the ball should never get too far out in front of you, because the ball moves with your body. So as you go left, the ball's coming left. As you go right, the ball comes right. When you stop, the ball you can't reach out, and like the ball's got to be stopped with you. And then, and for you to be able to shoot it, right, you got to keep that ball back right into the pocket and able to shoot. So that ball, so we work on that too, like just minor things, like, you have to have the basketball. So when we're going through our skill work every day throughout the year, again, like there's some kids that get bored with it, and I preach to them all the time, guys, like, you're going to separate yourself in this first 15-minute segment, and then we'll go another 15 minutes of skill work. But like, you might think that it's boring or that you're too good for it right now, but I'm telling you, and the kids who have bought into it and have done it,
see the growth, huh?
Yeah, like they've made huge strides. So, we're always looking. I mean, you got to play at different speeds. You think you're Rip Hamilton or Reggie Miller, they played with great speed off the ball. Stephen Curry plays with great speed off the ball. But somebody like Damian Lillard, Devin Booker, those guys are playing, Russell Westbrook even, those guys are playing at different speeds with the basketball. So, and in our offense, and we're working on finishes, and we're working on shooting kind of within our change pace, change direction. But I think that is just an absolutely critical one that we hit on. And it's really made a huge difference in our turnovers and our ability to just run our offense, to get open looks. And it's been really elite for our guys. The other things that we work on, like in our offense, we have 4 finishes that I think that we need to perfect. So we're working on an extended finish, just a regular finish, your shoulders up, your elbows up above your shoulder, your eyes are to the rim, chins to the rim, run through that finish. We have a same foot, same hand finish, right foot, right hand. Some call it like a goofy finish. And then we'll go, like, we have a power finish, just you're off 2 feet, get to the lane, get on 2, you can step through or go up through some contact. And then a reverse finish. So, and then, we're also working on like our pickups, high and low. We're looking on, our sweeps. We promote high quality finishes. So, that means the ball's touching the top of the backboard and falls directly through the net. Ultimately, just what I've noticed is in the game you're getting bumped and you're playing at a different speed in the game, and there's different emotion, and finishes tend to start falling short sometimes.
Yes, I definitely agree with you on that. I see that all the time.
Yeah. You know how it goes.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
so we overemphasize guys. Like, you've got to have an ability to have a clean, crisp pickup, finish high, overemphasize the footwork, overemphasize the extension. Our eyes are to the rim, we extend and explode. And again, like, I'm not the smartest coach in the world. I don't know it all, but I've just been really lucky to be around some really intelligent coaches. I've learned a ton from them. We shoot a ton in practice.
Hmm.
We've shot more this year in practice than I ever have. And I can't remember where I heard that from. I was listening to a podcast, and just players just don't get enough shots in practice sometimes. And at the high school level, I mean, you got a couple guys that might want to go play college, so they may stay after and want to shoot, or they may come before and shoot. But, I mean, and that's fine. The kids who don't want, that's fine. I mean, but you think of, if they're not going and getting in extra shots during the year, and then you come to practice and they may take, I don't know, 15 to 20 shots is all. And they're hardly getting any shooting. So we've tried to shoot more this year, which has actually been beneficial for us, I think. And we use the term, we drill being shot ready in our offense.
I like that term a lot. Shot ready. That's
Yeah,
huge.
you're kind of sitting down, your hips are down, your shoulders are down. And then the other part of being shot ready, though, is we drill the passer on throwing a strike. Like, you have to put the ball, and there's a crazy stat. I was watching a game on ESPN, and it was about Louisville. I think it was last year, but it gave the percentage on, it was like a passing percentage when guys were kind of hit in what they defined as their shooting pocket versus when they weren't. And the percentages was like a 20% difference.
I
When
believe it.
guys,
Yeah.
yeah, when you're able to just catch in your shooting pocket and go and take the shot, you don't have to reach up across your body, then pull it back in, and now you have way too much movement in your shot, or you give the defender an extra second to close out, or maybe now you got to put the ball, on the ground and take a step left and now shoot. Now it's really going down. So we've tried really hard to drill, really, really hard to drill shot ready, throw a strike, the less movement, the better, for sure. So kind of as a recap, and we're working ball handling, we're working footwork, we're working change pace, change direction. We're working on our 4 finishes that we need in our program, and then we're working on shooting.
And I want to ask, because you brought it up a couple of times, one of the challenges with these things of skill development is it could become routine, it could become monotonous, it could become boring, as you've mentioned a couple of times. So I wanted to follow up and ask about, how are some ways that you keep things moving along where players aren't, just going through the motions, and it's actually pushing them and challenging them? Are there things that are done to vary it, or is it a case where you just really emphasize the importance of it, and they sort of work through it, even if it is sometimes some of the same things that they're doing continuously?
Yeah, that's a great question. In season, typically I'll kind of leave it. I won't vary it too much. I mean, I'll give them some different things once in a while. If I know that, hey, okay, we're getting a little bored in our 3-angle finishing, we may need to, add in box finishing, or, hey, we're getting a little bored in our side smacks, let's add something to it, whatever that is. But for the most part, I'm just emphasizing what we believe in. And then the other thing is, like, when we get into the off season, I will expand that some more, and we'll work on some different things and get guys in different spots. But it's kind of like, I mean, guys can change role in season for sure, but it's like, man, if you're not going to dominate the role that we've given you, then I have a hard time giving you another role, or more. But the thing that I've found that's actually been pretty beneficial is I try to just find, just like I was telling you, I sent that Devin Booker clip. I'll just try to find clips and games that I'm watching, and I'll just record it and send it to them, like, hey guys, this is why we're working on, our start to stops, or this is why we are emphasizing to break the floor and we're pounding the basketball, and this is why we're emphasizing the high quality finish. And so I just try to find real examples for them and send them to them. Or, if I hear about another team that's doing something similar to we are, and I'll kind of tell them about that. And just kind of bring those things up and point those areas out, just to kind of keep their interest peaked. And ultimately what it comes down to, I mean, especially in season, is like some kids are going to take it more serious than others, and that's fine. Like, I cannot force them in the long run, but it's a separator. And the kids who do it, and the kids who are bought in, and the kids who want to get better, ultimately they just separate themselves a bit, and they end up getting the minutes that the other kid may have wanted.
And that's kind of like the biggest motivator. That'll kind of quell some boredom they might feel doing these drills, and they realize, oh well, if I don't do these or put the time in and improve, then I'll be on the bench or not playing as much, and then that's some real boredom in some sense, of not being able to play as much as you want to. So there's some natural motivators there. No, I like that. And I think one of the challenges that all coaches face, especially considering the time or lack thereof that we sometimes have in our programs, is being able to differentiate in a way that we're serving our players as individuals and meeting them where they're at, versus just treating everybody the equal and having the same expectations for everyone. So when we talk about the concept of developing players of all skill levels, how do you and your staff work together to try and get players better where they're at, as opposed to kind of that one size fits all mentality?
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, now we've talked about things, that we focus on in our skill development, player development, those things that kind of remain the same, those 5 things. But now the next question is, we need to assess where each player is at and determine really what they need to make that next jump. So as a staff, I mean, we're continuing to have conversations daily. I mean, you know how it goes. You talk about your kids and worry about that. I have 2 daughters and love them and talk about them and worry about them, but I feel like I also have 10 more kids that my wife hears about, and I talk about them with her, or even, how can we do things, and you're just worried about them and trying to help them and help be their best. So, I mean, when it comes down to it, I mean, and I heard this from somebody else, but it's like, we're not trying to take a bench player to an all conference player necessarily in season. It's like, okay, how do we take the 8th guy up to the 7th guy, and how do we take our 6th man into a potential starter role? How are we taking an all conference player to all state, a starter to all conference, a role player to starter, someone who doesn't see minutes to getting more minutes? And so those are the things those are the questions we're kind of asking ourselves as we begin to try to make individual plans and comparisons. So I was just a part of a mentorship meeting with Coach Beckner and this group of coaches, where we talked about in-season development and the power of player comparisons. So this is something that I'm having all our players do. Think of a player that they want to be like, that they want to think like, look like, whatever that is, and emulate on the court. And then sit down with those players, with our players, and pick out parts of the player's game they want to be like, that my current player does well, and then pick out some parts of that player's game where my current player needs to improve. So again, like I told you, we had a point. I mean, now it gives them some what's the right word? Maybe it gives them some kind of skin in the game. Like, maybe they have some say in some of their development. Like, it's, hey, and it also gives them some responsibility for it as well. Like, you got to go do some work. Like, go find the guys that you like, and just like we were talking about as a staff, like, I had to look down and say, okay, who do I want on my staff? What do I value? Now we're making the players say, okay, who am I as a player? Like, what do I value? Who do I want to be like? And now you've got to go do some homework and find someone who fits that mold.
And I would think you maybe as a coach might get some answers you might not expect when you ask that question too.
Yeah, I mean, we have a 6'10", 6'11" junior. He does some great things. He's a great defender right now, blocks a lot of shots, has pretty good feet, does a great job defensively for us, has made some big strides on offense. He can step and shoot the ball. We haven't really needed it much this year, so we haven't really gone to it necessarily, but my assistant and I were both shocked when he said, his favorite player is Porzingis. And we were like, what? The unicorn is your favorite player? And we started having discussions about why. And Started having some conversations about some other guys that we thought he was like, but there's also some value in that. Like, why do you like Kristaps Porzingis, and what things does he do well that you see yourself doing or want to be able to do, or whatever that is. So, so let's take our point guard, for example. Like, he's taken a ton of development this season. He's taken off, but as we plan for his blueprint for the summer, we'll find things that we think will take his game to the next level. So he has a great shot to be all conference this year, I think. So, for example, he works with great pace, great change of direction, just like we discussed earlier. But the next step for him, I think, as our team changes and we evaluate next season, will be his pick and roll decision making. So he does a great job coming off the screen. He can use his body and put the defender in jail, change his direction and bursts of speeds. He creates that initial advantage in that level one of the pick and roll. We need him. We're going to need him. And we're actually jumping up a classification next year. We're going up to 5A. We're in 4A right now. So we're going to need him to continue to develop his ability to read level 2, which is how the screener's defender is playing him. Right. If he's in a hard hedge, Talmadge, what's your move? What's your next? If he's in a drop coverage, what are we doing? If they're icing it, what are we doing? Well, if they start to trap you, what are we doing? And then even further past that will be level 3, which is punishing the help side. So now it's okay. I created the initial advantage with my change pace, with my cross. I read the hard hedge. I took a hesitation dribble and then got downhill and attacked. And then the defense helped from the strong side. So it's an easy kick to the corner. Now they're in a scramble situation. Say the guy playing between two goes corner, we make an extra pass and have a wide open shot. So for him, and he started scoring the ball pretty well. And now the second time around, we're actually seeing teams. The other night, he just saw like a full face guard kind of denial. And so those are things with him that us as coaches are like, all right, he saw this type of defense. So we need to put that in his development plan really this year, because he's probably going to see a little bit more of it. But, we need to put in his development plan, what he can do in those type of situations and how he can still be effective for us on the floor. We'll have a backup point guard next year who won't quite be at that level yet. So we'll focus more initially on the first level of pick and roll with him creating the advantage. Is it a jab? Is it a glide? Is it a, how do I get my defender just to lean a little bit? That's all you need him to do. He just needs to get off balance a little bit. Use your eyes for that, your shoulder, your ball fake, your rip, your pivot, your jab, get that defender leaning. So we'll work hard with him on that kind of initial step in creating that advantage. I just talked a little bit about our big man. He's pretty versatile, but one thing we're working with him on is rolling hard to the hoop. And that's some feedback we got from a college coach was, we want to see him sprint to screen, hit, even if he's not necessarily making contact, because a lot of it's now slips or ghosts or whatever that is. But we want to see him roll harder to the hoop. So now we've been working with him on, okay, Mike, you gotta sprint to action, get out, get downhill into the roll, and be able to make a catch and a good finish.
And I think one of the interesting things about you kind of talked about the different layers is it seems like that would be helpful for you and your staff to know, like, okay, before we can even, expect a player to, do X, Y, and Z, we have to make sure that they are doing this first layer first, then it sort of builds on itself. There's kind of like check marks almost in place to make sure they meet this criteria before we focus on something else on like the next criteria.
Exactly. And we're going to lose. I mean, we have a senior this year. He's the 4A player of the year. He's phenomenal. He's going to be a Division I player, and we're going to, he's gone next year, and there's no way ultimately we're going to replace him. It's just not going to happen. But there's things that the other kids coming back that if a couple of them pick up in a couple areas, that we can kind of fill some of that void, So we have one kid that we think very highly of, that he needs some to develop his weak hand a little bit better. And some of that we'll hit him hard in the summer with some of that. He's shooting the ball pretty well right now, and he can defend. He's a little bit bigger body, but the turnovers and some of the weak hand stuff for him, and we'll get him in more pick and roll next year as well. So just the same thing, right? We're working on those 3 different layers of, all right, you got to hit layer 1, you got to hit layer 2, and just make those things very clear. Very clear to those guys. We have another big man, 6'6", and we've talked quite a bit about his development and getting him more off the block, and he's expressed that to us. And especially with him playing with a 6'11", center, it's, now we need to spend more time with him on his ball handling, footwork, his foot speed, and then his decision making, on the perimeter will be critical as far as his development. So as you start to get players in your offense and in your system, you can start to see how development gets tailored to each individual guy. I think the most important thing is you have to know your players' strengths and weaknesses. And then even more importantly, you have to have a relationship of trust with them so they buy in and know that ultimately you're looking out for their best interest.
Yeah, and I really like the idea of having conversations with your players. And I think that one of the things, like, sometimes I know I can get ahead of myself as a coach, is I can, like, assume what my players want, or assume that they know what they want to work on or what they need to get better on, or they assume that, like, they see the things that I see. But I think unless you have those conversations, there'll probably be a lot of gaps in terms of, like, where
Yes.
you're at and what you see versus what they see. And I know, speaking from experience, and I'm sure you can too, like, that can get really frustrating for players when they just feel like they're not being heard, or that,
Yeah.
like, they're not seeing the same things that their coach does. Or I've been on the side of, the coach, says, X, Y, and Z, you got to do X, Y, and Z, but they don't know why, or they don't understand
Yeah.
where that critique or criticism is coming from. So that open dialogue seems to be something really important for you.
Yeah. And that's something I picked up in my master's program, is just, it's that communication piece. It's that, and Phil coins it, like, high clarity equals high performance. And like, I've had jobs like outside of basketball, right, that I'm frustrated, where it's like, man, is management even listening? Do they know
Yeah.
what's going on? Like, nobody's there to listen or to hear, and they're frustrated that somebody's not doing this, but they have no clue what's going on the employee level. So there's just too many times I've seen just miscommunicate, or lack
Lack of
of
communication.
communication,
Yeah,
I
that's what I
should
was
say.
about to say.
That just causes problems. And I mean, I had a really, really eye-opening exercise that I did this year. It's the first year I did it, but before the season started, I had the players rank themselves 1 through 10.
Oh, I've seen this. Yeah. Yeah.
But I also had them list how many minutes they think they should get. And I was shocked at some of the results that came back. I mean, for the most part, it was kind of like, all right, that's kind of spot on. But there's some that I'm like, man, no wonder some kids are frustrated. Like, there is a different sense of reality in some situations happening. And I think it ended up being, so we got a 32-minute game, and you got all these different players and how many minutes they think you should get. And I think off the top of my head, the math came out to, there was 82 excess minutes that if I were to play the players all the minutes they thought they get per game, there was 82 minutes over the actual amount of a game. And I didn't go to the kids and say, like, hey, here's where your teammate ranked you. I didn't say that. I didn't go through that, but we did have that minute conversation of, you guys, there's 28 minutes in a game, 32 times by 4. Yeah, 128. And you guys put on here, if I add up all your minutes per game, it was like 220 minutes. So even more than I just said, like, do you guys see the challenge that is? And so you recognize that? Yeah, we get it. But, there's always going to be frustration with those things. It's just how it goes. But man, yeah,
that is eye-opening. That'd be something interesting. I'm actually going to write that down as, maybe it's something to do next year, and see, like, where do they see everything at versus, like, what do I see and how many. That sounds really eye-opening.
Yeah. And I just don't think kids, like, and you can't blame them. I mean, even the coach, like, if you don't have those type of conversations, every single kid on the roster thinking they should get at least 15 minutes, it's like, man, that's not gonna work.
Yeah. What do you do in a situation where you find as a player they're kind of like hitting that wall, or they're just not progressing to the level that either you or they're hoping that they would be?
Yeah, that's another really good question. And this is something that's going to happen at times. At least I've seen it happen at times. But I think the most important thing to understand is why. And some questions to ask that I try to ask at least, or in my own mind or to my staff is, why is the player stuck? Are they bored? Are they not feeling challenged? Are we not being clear enough with them? Are they being lazy? Like there's a variety of things it could be. And again, just again Phil Beckner, he's made such an impact on me. I mean, he probably doesn't even know it. I don't even know, he might know who I am, right? I mean, I'm in his mentorship group, but whatever. It's just, and he talked to us the other night about your players either need to be coached, challenged, or connected with. And it goes back to, okay, this player maybe not progressing. Maybe they need to be connected with. Maybe I haven't asked them how their family's doing. Maybe they got a sibling who's sick. Maybe they got an uncle who, you never know what's going on with a 16 through 18-year-old. So it could, maybe their progression is stalled because, they're struggling in school, or their friend group is changing, or you just never know what that is. So I think you got to be very, you got to have that trust with the player enough to where you can go have some of those conversations and see if you can figure out why. You got to dedicate that time. But ultimately the player is the one who feels what we're teaching. So there has to be some sort of constant communication with them about what they're feeling, and how we can improve the overall effectiveness of that development. So I might tell Tyler to go, execute this on the perimeter, this move, or execute this in the pick and roll. But I can say it, I can see it, but he's the one that goes through it and feels it. So I got to have a conversation now with him about, okay, what did you feel? Did it feel right? Did it feel off? Did it feel, okay, try this. Maybe this will help. That's why you felt that way. Or, man, you were off balance when you turned the corner there. That's why that's why you felt like you were leaning left. That's why your jump shot went left, whatever that is. But, ultimately when we understand why, then from there we can take an action. So let's say the player is uncomfortable in the pick and roll, specifically reading and punishing the help side, back to our example earlier. So because of that, they aren't having success in the pick and roll. Now they don't want to be involved in the pick and roll. They don't want, they don't
shy away from it.
Yeah, they don't even want to be involved in that action, which is a problem in the offense because maybe it's one of your main components. So I would try to begin there with questions about how it feels for them. I would then watch their individual film on every pick and roll situation that they've been in during a game, see if we can find some tweaks and some things that are going, that I think at least, right? And then I can take it back to him and we can talk. And then, I would sit and watch it with him and kind of have an open dialogue and talk about those things. And then, like I said earlier about like a player comparison, I would try to take a player, college or NBA, and watch them and pick and roll, and then take it back to the floor, get in some sort of short-sided game situation where all they have to do is read the help side defender. So now it may be to throw the hook pass. That might be all it is. Dribbling off their right hand, the help comes from the low weak tag, throw the hook pass on the lift to the guy in the corner. And that's all they needed, Yeah. And we're giving them a passing option to their arsenal. Now he's saying, oh, I feel a lot more comfortable. I couldn't read where that help was coming from. Strong, weak, and I did not know then where to go with the ball. It might be his teammate needed to lift to get into his vision, and that might fix some of that too. So after that, we'll rep it. We'll let them make mistakes, and we'll rep it some more. One thing I've always tried to follow, and this is from Fran Fraschilla, but just coaching in general. He talked about teaching skills, communication skills, organizational skills, motivational skills, and under pressure skills. And then he talked about when teaching a new skill, to explain it, to demo it, to rep it, to correct it, and then rep it again. And ultimately it's just going to come down to one, you got to find out, what's halting the progression, how can we fix it, involve the player in that process, and then, correct it and rep it.
And I think one of the things about that is I think as a coach, sometimes I know it's hard for me to accept that, but sometimes as a coach, I have to accept like, okay, I might be the problem here. Like it might be something I'm doing or not doing that's like having them hit
Yeah.
that wall, like you said about the lack of connection or the lack of some communication breakdown that's happened somewhere. But I think as coaches, we owe it to our players to, also look in the mirror and say like, maybe it's also something I'm doing or not.
Yeah.
I could be doing better. And it could be tough sometimes because we do have egos a little bit as coaches. I know I'm like, I know I did this correctly. I know I'm saying it right. Like, why aren't you doing it? But
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things too that kind of jumped up about one of your answers is like, I think something that I've done sometimes, and you kind of alluded to it as well, is I think if sometimes players are hitting that wall, like maybe just giving them something that they can be successful at, something
Yes.
that they can do really well, and let them like see success before like trying to go back to whatever
Yeah.
that next challenge or that next hurdle they're trying to get to. Like, take a step back and have them do something that they do really well and let them like get back into that sort of groove of being successful. And that might be all they need to sort of get the motivation to get up and going again.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's a great point. That's very well said, actually. Get them seeing success again.
Um, how does this is such a challenge, I know, the development of how you prioritize and work with the development of your individual players, how does that sort of work and flow into also what you like to run it as a whole team? So as you start to
Yeah.
think about what you want from individual players and how you want them to develop individually, how does that kind of flow within what you also want to be running in terms of like whole team concepts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the most critical aspect of skill development ultimately at our level and for us is developing players to have the skills that fit into our offensive actions. If we can't execute what we're trying to accomplish on the offensive end, our skill work is a failure. And of course, we're not recruiting to a system, so we may have to make some tweaks year in year out to better fit personnel. But I truly do believe that we can, based off our offense, we know what it is, we know kind of where players fit or what we need. We can kind of develop them and give them the skills to have success. So we run a Princeton dribble drive hybrid offense. So for us, we need to be able to handle the ball with both hands, have great feet, change pace, change direction. We need to be able to finish. We need to be able to shoot the ball well. We need to be able to pass the ball well. There's different actions that come. We've got to be able to hit guys in the shooting pocket, to hit cutters when they're open, and in the timing of the offense, and passing is another one of those things that's just critical. And but we have those terms that we use. We try to use our drills and our things too. So for example, like if we're talking passing, like we're using the terms throw a strike to shooters. We're trying to eliminate any extra movement for the shooter once they catch the ball. We're trying to throw guys open in our action. Like guys are open way sooner than when we throw the basketball, and it still happens. It takes time. Like we're in year one of putting in an entirely new system.
Yeah.
So it takes them time to kind of feel comfortable in those things, but it's a double-edged sword. You want to eliminate turnovers as much as possible, but I can't have guys playing scared to turn it over because we won't make the right pass if we are. So there's specific footwork that we teach when we run through different offensive actions for shooters, for cutters, for screenings. So when we're hitting our skill work every day, we really have those specific movements in mind that we know are going to happen in our offense. And again, like there was a time I thought that we started getting a little bored in some of our stuff. But then when we got on film, like we just continued to hound on film, like look at what we're doing on offense and look where this comes into play. And
Right.
look at this college team that runs this offense and look at how he's playing this possession. And Tyler, this is you. Like, look where you're at on the floor. Like, this is what we're trying to get you to do. So I just think some of that consistency and persistence in teaching, again, especially in year one, like I only think it's going to improve. Guys have done a phenomenal job buying into all of it. And I think it's new. It's very, very new for them. Just the overall skill work, emphasis, the overall kind of player development philosophy, and then the offense for sure, and defense as well. Like it's all new to them. But just that just that consistent, that consistent approach from us as a staff, getting guys in the right positions, showing them, pointing out their successes, pointing it out from our own film, pointing out from someone else's film. And it's all, I mean, we've made a lot of strides. I'm actually really happy with where we're at, kind of as I looked at the season overall of where we would potentially be at this time. But it's just, and I think it comes down to being clear. I said it earlier. I mean, high clarity equals high performance. We're just super clear with our guys and try to be super clear with them about what we see and what we want and why. And, we've developed relationships with them where I think they trust us and believe in us for the most part. And that's what's been the difference.
And it's kind of like the big thing, I suppose, is especially like you said, like year one, like you really have to establish that level of trust and that level of like they gotta be able to want to buy in and commit to what it is that you want to be doing. And I know that sometimes can get really challenging where you have a system that you really believe in, and then like if your players aren't completely bought in, maybe they don't like fully fulfill the requirements of that system, and then the players think the system doesn't work, and then you kind of know it does, but like there's that breakdown. And I think one of the things I also get from a lot of your responses is I think like the visual aspect, and it seems like you and your staff really work on showing your players a lot of things, whether it's their own personal teamwork, individual work, but also how it's like run at like different levels or higher levels, and more of like the advanced version of things. And it seems like that's something that your players seem to be really benefiting from as well.
And one thing that's helped us this year, Randy Sherman, Radius Athletics on Twitter, is a phenomenal follow. If you guys aren't following him, I would highly recommend it. But one thing that stuck out to me from him was like the simplicity, keeping things simple. You don't have to add more. You don't have to change things up. Like too often a coach loses a game and they like flip the script on what they do from game to game. And it's, I get it.
Yeah.
You have to make adjustments. And again, like there's a lot of ways to win. And coaches have won a lot more than I have, but there's ways and things to make. At least what I believe is there's adjustments that have to be made for sure, game to game. But if there's not like keeping things simple, repping it, giving them some read and react options. Okay, if the defense plays you this way, this is what we do. Like this is the read. Okay, if the defense plays you this way, you don't need to fight that. Like this is the read. We don't need to switch our whole offense because somebody now decides to pressure us. It's just this is the read to it. We rep it in practice. We continue. And there was a point in time where like we saw that buy-in occur. Like our first two games, we barely scored the basketball, like barely. And we started getting we won both the games, but I started getting questions like, oh, your offense. And we're two games into an entirely new system, new terminology, new everything, where we weren't shooting the ball well at the time. The state just switched the state ball. And so they were, we're playing with a different ball. It's hard to shoot with. Like there's all these factors. And I just had like radius athletics ringing in my head. Like, you do not need to change. You do not need to add more. Like we've added as we've gone throughout the season, but it's all within like this very, very similar concepts, and we've stayed the course. And I think that has really helped our guys buy into. They see the passion and the vision and the belief that we had, and we shared with them why we do it. And here's some teams that do it really well, and they've bought into that, and it's changed drastically, and we're, they do a good job executing, and they've bought in.
And I think that just really ties into you having confidence as a coach in what you're doing, and confidence in your staff, and that belief in yourself, and that you gotta trust what you're doing out there. And if you're gonna blow everything up after a game or two, like what message does that tell your players? It's like, oh, coach must not have really believed in that to begin with or anything. So yeah, it could be tough sometimes, especially when people are questioning you 2 games in. But staying the course, I think, is key if you believe in it.
Yeah. Yeah, it adds to your credibility, right? You believe in it, you rep it, you work it, you teach it. Comes down to what you teach, and you need some time sometimes. So stick with it. That's what I would say would be my advice.
Awesome. Excellent, coach. I mean, there's some really good stuff in here. And to wrap up, there's a couple questions I ask a couple guests, or every guest, actually. A couple questions I ask every guest. Much better. First question, thinking back on your coaching career, what is a coaching moment of yours that you think those listening would be able to learn from?
Yeah, I would say, you get the old adage, and sometimes it may become, I don't know, like I'll believe it when I see it, but be ready, stay ready. You should be preparing. If you're an assistant or whatever it is, like you should be preparing for the head coaching job. Like I was an interim head coach, and I found out 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, I guess, before the season. And at that point, it was too late for me to say, uh-oh, I need to be a head coach. I got this advice from somebody else. I'm not, it is what it is. But I had prepared, and I had all what I thought. And it's different when you're actually the head coach. Like it was different. There were some things that came up that I'm like, oh, okay, I wasn't going to be ready for that until it happened. But I prepared for that moment. So when that moment came, like, it was there and I had to be ready. It was too late to prepare at that moment. So I would say that would be a coaching moment that I think, all of us as coaches can implement and learn from. Be ready, stay ready. If your time comes, you've got to be ready.
So it's kind of sounds like what we tell our players too on the bench.
No, you're right. You're right. I mean, we preach to them like, hey, night in, night out, it could be different. Are you ready? Can you go in and go play? Can you go execute? Are you paying it? All those things. It's the same for coaches.
Yeah, I've had that, as an experience before. I remember just even like as a JV coach where, you could have like your varsity coach, an emergency comes up, or,
Yes.
if you're assistant coach, all right, like even it's not the season, it could be your game. And it's like, do you know what you're doing? Do you know what's expected of you? That sort of thing. So you never know, right? Like next man up, next coach up too sometimes.
Yes. No, it's so true.
To wrap up, coach, I give every guest what I call a 60-second soapbox, a platform to get out, final thought, closing message, a closing idea, just something to leave the listeners with. So I'm just going to go ahead and give you the floor, and I'm going to let you take it from here.
Awesome. I appreciate it. One thing that has been on my mind lately and that I see a lot of talk about, and maybe this just comes back to my overall thoughts on leadership, is there's a lot of positive conversation about how to improve the high school game. You have the shot clock conversation, which I'm all for. We have we need to get a charge arc in. We need to stop the recruiting that happens at public high schools. There's just all these things that are, I guess they're in our control, but they're out of our control a little bit as coaches. Like we can kind of fight that fight and go to battle for those things that we believe in. But I would challenge coaches, myself included, and my staff to control what you can control. And the number one thing I think is to continue to better yourself. We preach to our athletes and our kids, you got to get better. You got to get in the gym. You got to get more shots. You should be this dedicated. But how dedicated are we to improvement? What are we doing as coaches to improve? Are we reading books? Are we going to clinics? Are we listening to podcasts? Are we spending time with our families? Are we pouring into other people? Are we, are we scheduling the service projects for our program to be a part of? I would challenge coaches to, continue to improve themselves. The game will continue to improve. We'll continue to have things change within the game, and things will, kind of go upward from there. But continue to improve yourself as well.
I like that a lot. I think, it's a lifelong journey, that this coaching thing, and that never stops. You never stop learning, never stop improving. That's really well said. Coach Hartman, I want to thank you for spending some time talking about your team and the journey of player skill development. And it's such a difficult task, but such a rewarding one too at the same time. So I really appreciate you spending some time sharing your insights about what you and your program have done. And it sounds like the results are going really well so far. So I hope that keeps up, and best of luck going forward. Thank you so much, Coach.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on.
And thank you so much, guys, for listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast, and we will see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.